just going to do a quick intro as well for the people that are coming in here,
Yeah.
for joining today. So welcome back to our weekly segment, Welfare Wednesday, and I'm here with the UBC Paw Club, also UBC Pre-Veterinary Animal Welfare Club. And our guest today, as she has already mentioned, is our very own PhD candidate of the Animal Welfare Program in LFS Applied Biology. And so Emeline has completed her Bachelor's of Science in Biology at the University of Rennes and her Master's in Ethology in University of Paris. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Both located in France. And Emeline has experience working as a research assistant as well in the UBC Animal Welfare Program and is now a PhD candidate in AWP studying dairy cattle welfare, especially focusing on the relation between social behavior and personality. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so could you please tell us to begin with a little bit about your path to acquiring your PhD candidacy and your research position?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of people, when I started university in biology, like my first idea was vet. I just knew like I like animals and what could I do? I can be a vet. There's actually other paths that I figured out like, you know, as time went on. And yeah, I just took interest, like the courses that were taught that were on animal behavior, I thought were really interesting. So I went towards that for the master's. And then I was like, okay, that's great, but what can I apply it to? And yeah, so that's how I got started to be interested in farm animal welfare. Where I come from, we have a lot of pigs. So my first interest was actually in pigs. But then when I did the second year of my master's, we had an internship opportunity that opened up at the UBC Dairy Center that's out in Agassiz. And so I was like, sure, Canada, why not? You know? So yeah, so I decided to join, and then things went well and they offered me to stay and do a PhD. So I was really lucky in that sense. And yeah, now I've been for 3.5 years doing my PhD, and hopefully I can find a position later on.
Yeah, of course, that's awesome. Yeah, and I believe there's a position for a research assistant open there that's currently in applications, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we often have opportunities actually for undergrad students that might be interested in joining. So we have like the practicum that is running every term, so they can participate, like find out both how a dairy operation works, because our farm is a fully functioning commercial dairy farm. But then also you can come out and help out with the research as well. So there is the animal welfare program there, but there's also the reproduction team. So yeah, there's possibility to come with both. So there's practicum positions, you can come as directed study, undergrad thesis, like just get in touch with people and there's plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for letting us know.
Yeah.
A little bit more about your research, what your experience is like as a research assistant.
Yeah. So yeah, it was between the master's and being accepted for the PhD, there was that wait period. So I was helping out with other research projects. So the way that it works at the Dairy Center, the graduate students are leading their research projects. And so then we have a bunch of people, undergrads, visiting international students that are coming in and helping out. So that allowed me to kind of, you know, just look around, see what other people are doing, see what are my interests. So that was really cool. Like, of course, you do like part in the barn, but you also have that part that is like watching videos, a lot of watching videos, analyzing the data, writing the papers. And then like what I was doing this morning, like communicating the results. And I was on a farm this morning. So we're talking to some farmers from the province and letting them know what we find. And all of that was like so inspiring. I was like, I really need to stay.
Great to hear. And that's an experience you would recommend to an undergraduate as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of the people that came and did the practicum, for example, or came through any other way, like I think they really enjoyed the experience. Yeah, and if you want to do vet school, then you have that big, like large animal experience.
Hmm.
If you want to do research, or if you don't know, like that's a good opportunity to just come and see how research is actually done, and hopefully help you make up your mind, right?
Really work experience helps with that for sure. Um,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
in comparison to the research assistant position, what does your day-to-day life look like as a PhD candidate?
So the main difference is that I'm the one that has to come up with the ideas for the projects. So we're super lucky in the program. There are two professors, Dan Weary and Nina van Keiseling. They're like giving us a lot of freedom. So they have fundings for broad themes,
Mhm.
and then we can kind of pick and choose depending on our interest what we want to work on. So that's really incredible freedom, and we're just so lucky to be able to do that. And so yeah, you have to come up with the research idea and the research design, conduct the research project. So depending what you're doing, your day can look really, really different. But in my case, it involves a lot of playing around with the calves,
Oh,
which is like not too bad. Yeah, and then watching videos, analyzing data, writing paper, and then you can get the opportunity to be a teacher assistant as well. So I've been a teacher assistant for ABBY 314, the Animals and Society course with Nina, and then ABBY 415, the Applied Animal Behavior last year. So yeah, these are all like very good experience. There's not really a typical day, which is also what I like about it. Yeah, it's just, you know, you never know what's coming.
that sounds like fun. Really
Yeah, it is.
over time, right? Um, and I wanted to ask, what is the biggest difference between studying back home in France versus in Canada? Is there anything specific that you prefer over the other or anything like that?
Yeah, it's completely different. I mean, I cannot say for
Mm.
PhD, but I can see like the difference for my undergrad and what I see as a TA. It's just completely different. But the whole system is completely different. Like we don't pay for classes at university. There are no tuition or very, very little tuition. So that the whole dynamic then is completely different as well, in terms of like the number of students and what the professors can or cannot do. So that changes a lot of things, and I think that's the main difference. Another thing is that you can choose your courses, which you cannot do in France.
Yeah.
So you sign up for first year biology and they give you a timetable, and that's where you go at what time, and that's the course you're going to study.
Yeah.
In second or third year, you get a few options, but you don't get to choose as much. For the masters, in the animal welfare program, the research-based masters, the one that I did was more course-based masters. So I had a year and a half of classes and just two internships, one of 2 months and one of 6 months.
Hmm.
So yeah, completely different system. I see value in both though. Like I think it's really nice that the students like can get to pick and choose what they want to
Yeah.
do. But yeah, so I think that would be the main difference. For PhD, I'm not sure, but
Yeah. Oh, okay. It must be easier to for people that prefer like a steady environment, right? Because I'm guessing you're seeing the same people every day if you have the same amount of courses, I'm assuming.
yeah, you do see the same people every day, but it's like very, very big
Oh, oh,
classes of like about like first year you'd have about like in my university we had something like 300 people.
oh,
So yeah, you get to know the people that sit next to you because we always pick the same spot.
yeah.
but yeah, otherwise like, it's not so much. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's really nice, and also to be forced in a way to have to take some courses that you would not take on your own, and just to kind of expand your mind and your knowledge, right?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Um, if you could choose again, would you still choose to study abroad for your PhD?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like it comes with its own challenges, like I'm far away from my family, I'm far away from my friends there. So, it's a big switch of life to come and move across the world. And, you know, I miss the French food and the French cheese, you know, this type of things. But no, I mean, it's been like a great experience. And I think it really depends like what you want to do. But like at UBC, we're super lucky. Like the animal welfare program is like leading like worldwide, and it's just amazing to be able to study here. So I feel really lucky. I would definitely recommend it. And even like for shorter durations, you know, if you have the possibility to do that, it really broadens up your mind and your perspective on things. And yeah, I would recommend to anybody to move across the world at some point.
Oh, that's great. That's great advice. Is there anything of advice you would offer somebody that's thinking about moving abroad for even their master's or their PhD in the future?
Yeah, it's tricky because I've kind of like just went with the flow, and I was like, oh, there's an opportunity there, sure, I'll go. But but like just looking at the location. I mean, language can be a limiting factor too, like but just looking at the location, if it's somewhere that could be a good fit, and you know, then it's just, you've got to do it. You got to be brave. You've got to do it. And I think everything happens like the most challenging part is the first few weeks. Mm-hmm. Like the first 2-3 weeks, like a lot of people are like, I regret, yeah. I regret doing this. Don't turn around. Don't book a ticket back just yet. Yeah. Like stick with it. And it's really like, you know, your mind is open. You meet a lot of new people, and yeah, I think it's really enriching. So I would recommend anybody to do it for sure.
That's great. That's great to hear. And I just want to do a quick reminder for the people in the chat is that you can ask questions at any time, and then I'll incorporate it into the interview as well. So don't feel afraid or scared to post some questions as well. And of course, you already answered this question a little bit, but I wanted to ask again, was research always something you knew you were interested in? And I know you've considered that veterinary science was another path that you might take. Yeah. What was the ultimate reason that kind of swayed you away from veterinary science?
I think it was like the perspective of, I mean, it's very basic, but then I came to the realization like, oh, the difference that I'm going to make is going to be in like a very few animals' life. And it's very important. And of course, like it's, the role of veterinarians is super important, but I don't think like that was enough for me, like that, from the perspective that I had with it. So yeah, I think in what I do, I feel like there is more possibility to have a broader impact, even if it's a small impact, but it affects more animals. And I think like that's kind of what drew me to it. And the fact that I was mostly interested in behavior rather than health. And then, no, like research was not a goal at all. You know, I just did the undergrad. The next logical step was the master. I was like, sure, I'll do that. And I remember the first day that I arrived in Canada, being picked up from the airport, and another student was asking me like, oh, do you want to do a thesis after? Would you like to do a PhD? And I'm like, I don't think so. That sounds like a lot of work. I don't think that's for me. But, you know, then being at the farm and seeing actually like what is the life of a PhD student, like what type of work they do, like I found that like I was like, oh no, that's great, like that's what I want to do, and then we'll see where I go next. But it's kind of like just the mentality of doing like what appeals to me on the moment, and so far it's been working pretty good.
Definitely sentiment about, you know, having that impact on animals' lives as well. It's two complete, yeah. But both are very important, animal welfare for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
So we're going to move on a little bit from more of the career-related questions. Of course, if anyone has anything else, please feel free to add. But I wanted to move on to more on the research topics that you've done. So watching that are in the second year of LFS or later, the next segment will be very familiar, as we've all studied the dairy cattle welfare module in LFS 250. And for those that haven't taken the course yet, please pay attention, because this will be very helpful for you when you do take the course. So before we get started, congratulations on all of your publications. I believe it's 4 in total, right?
Yes, yes, more in the
Well,
work, but far out there. Yes.
congratulations for sure. And
Thank
could you
you.
talk about how you began your first research project? So how did you go about getting, the first one started, and a little bit more about what that project is about?
Yeah, so the first one was a bit like particular because that was during that internship. So I was actually assisting a PhD student
Hmm.
in the project that he was doing, Benjamin Lecor, which has also like a lot of publications with the program. If you want to read, it's really interesting. So yeah, I was helping him out at first. And so the project idea was kind of laid out. And at first I was just helping out in the barn, data collection. And then I helped out with the analysis and the writing. So that's kind of how it came up. And then the second project was a little bit different. So that's the castration paper, actually. That project was different because I had to come up with the topic and I had to come up with a question. Which is like a little bit challenging. I'm not gonna lie, but yeah. So that was the process. Just
Okay.
being in the barn and looking around and be like, okay, I identify that as an issue. What type of question could I ask? And then going about answering it.
Mm-hmm. Is it correct to understand it as like it's better to kind of get yourself involved and then kind of identify the issue afterwards rather than, coming up with a question and then getting involved?
Um, yeah, I think I mean, for me at least, it has been nice to have some experience before having to start my first project. Just even in terms of, understanding how the farm functions and what was possible, what is the normal, I was not a dairy cattle expert when I arrived at the farm. So just like learning how does the dairy industry function, like how does the farm operates in normal times, and then building from there and be like, okay, and learning, these are the main welfare issues. That's what we're trying to do.
Mm.
And then learning what has been done before. And that inspires like your own projects, right?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. And then, so I remember there was that one paper that what you were involved in that had the observing the difference in response to social stress in dairy.
Yes.
Um, and I wanted to ask, like personally, I was really interested in, was there an observable difference between, cows that haven't had a calf yet and cows that did have a calf? And what were their responses like?
Oh, I see. So in the paper, they were all very young still. They were about like 5 months old, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
at the time. So it was their first time being mixed with new individuals that they didn't know. So, but that was also like, I think like there's very, very few studies looking at those animals. A lot look at the cows that are producing milk and the impact that it can have on production, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if there is much difference. The one thing that was different compared to if you were to do the same study on older cows is that they were also learning a new environment. They had never used stalls before, so that space where they have to enter, lay down, and then back
Mm-hmm.
out. They had never used that before. So some of them were kind of confused because they had to learn, but the others were bullying them, and that was a stressful experience. And I think it's really important for the farmers to realize to what point mixing animals that don't know each other
Mm.
disturbs
Right.
them more than what you can see when you're just going through the barn, because we're looking 24-hour videos. So like we've seen a lot, and it was really impressive like how they're sweet animals, but they can get really nasty.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, they were like, pushing each other away, chasing each other around the pen. Like it was like some were really, really getting bullied. It was really not enjoyable to watch. But yeah, at least, if we keep putting evidence out there that doing that is very stressful, then that's a strong argument for farmers to figure out a different way to manage their farms so they can minimize the times that they're mixing individuals that don't know each other.
Well, that's great finding, actually. That's not something that I've considered before, is that they won't know each other, so they won't interact as well with each other. Very,
Yeah, they get competitive, you know, like they have their favorite
oh,
spot to lay down,
yeah,
their favorite spot to
yeah.
eat. Uh, so, you know, if someone new comes in and tries to take that,
Mm-hmm.
that's starting a
Oh,
war.
yeah. Oh, well, that's good to know. And the other study that I was really interested in when I read through it is the one on pessimistic dairy calves,
Yeah,
their susceptibility to pain-induced anhedonia. So
yeah.
tell the audience and me as well, I would like to know more about what anhedonia means and what led you to perform this study.
Okay, so that's the study that I joined in, like the very first one that I joined in. So the topic was there because the grad student that I mentioned earlier that was running the project was interested in two things, like differences between individuals, so personality, like, and traits like pessimism, and on the other side, like the effect of stressful experience or painful experiences and how it alters behaviors and emotional states in calves. So the idea here was kind of to link both. So he had come up with this technique to assess if the calves are optimistic or
Mm-hmm.
pessimistic. And then he wanted to see if that impacted their reaction to pain. So a common painful procedure that's done on dairy farms is disbudding, which is like burning the tip of the horn so it doesn't grow. So that has been shown like many times, like that is a painful experience. And what we know from humans and from studies on rats as well is that when you're in pain, you don't enjoy as much the things that you usually enjoy. And that's basically what anhedonia is.
Oh,
So it can be a loss in motivation to access something that you usually
mm-hmm.
like, or it can be just a lack of enjoyment when you're doing it. So if you think you're not feeling well, like you have a headache or something like that, maybe you don't want to go out with your friends, although that's something you really like to do
Yeah.
otherwise. Or maybe you'd go anyways, but you're just not having a great
Mm-hmm.
time. So that's basically what anhedonia is. So it was the idea with this study was just kind of just to prove the concept of anhedonia is that something that happens to calves after they're
Mm-hmm.
disbudded. So the way that we did that was with that sugar water solution. And so the calves loved it. Like we gave them to them, like some were going crazy. It was insane. So they were like consuming a lot. And we measured that consumption over multiple days. And then we did the disbudding. And after the disbudding, they could also get access to that sugar water solution. And they were not drinking it as much. We saw like a massive drop. Like some calves completely stopped drinking that sugar water. Some reduced like by 50% or over. And the calves that we assessed as more pessimistic were the ones that had the stronger reduction in that consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the results that we expected because
Yeah.
calves that are more pessimistic or individuals that are more pessimistic tends to react more strongly to a negative event, like be more impacted in their mood and their emotional state than an optimistic individual.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That's cool. You know if there's anything with the AWP program that kind of releases like a notice whenever publications are released? So everyone, well,
I think you can go on our Google Scholar. So if you go on the Animal Welfare Program website, there is a tab that has publications there.
mm-hmm.
And that links up to the Google Scholar. And I think you can set up to have notifications there. Yeah. And you can follow us on Twitter. We don't have Instagram, but we do
Oh,
have Twitter. And so we're trying to put a Twitter ad every time that a paper comes out.
right. I will link that with the recording of this video on our website afterwards so we can get notified for these.
Cool.
And then another question that I had is that I noticed that two of the publications were both about surgical and rubber ring castration, but they were done in time periods. So did you notice anything like drastic? The short term, I'm guessing the short term being hour and long term being the week long effects. Any difference?
Right. Not so much, because at the time of the castration, like we gave them the full pain control. So, you know, so the sedation, that's basically putting them to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
A local block so that they wouldn't feel like a local anesthetic, and then an analgesic to cover them over the next 24 hours-ish. So we didn't really see anything at the time of the procedure. Other studies have shown that surgical castration is more painful than the rubbering castration at the time of castration, especially if you don't give any pain control. In the case that you're given pain control, though, I'm strongly recommend using this one. I was on the farm this morning and talking to farmers, and I was advertising surgical castration. It's not that hard to do. It's not that gross. And your calves do much better on the long term. So the calves that we had, they were sleeping better, they were eating better, they started transitioning faster onto the grain as well. So it's easier after when you're weaning them off milk. They go and get the grain. They're already used to that. They were showing like much more pain behaviors, like licking around the site of the wound for like the 2 weeks after. And the argument that gets farmers almost automatically is that 2 months after the castration, we had about like 13 kilos difference between our two treatment groups. So the calves that were castrated with surgically were 13 kilos heavier on average than the ones that had the rubbering. So that's a strong argument for farmers when you're trying to, you know, sell them something that is going to take more time, that is going to be a little bit more costly. If you can show that eventually they'll get kind of a return on investment, like that's a strong argument. So yeah, that convinced a few of them today. So
I'm glad that the more, you know, the more welfare method does tie in with a better profit for them in the end as well. So that's a better way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that convinces them, convinces the farmers like more easily. I mean, they do care about doing things well and about taking good care of their animals. But you know, at the end of the day, it's also a business, and it's the way that they feed their family, right? So if they can also not lose money, that's a good point.
Absolutely. Something I learned this year with L252 is that with milk production, the happier the cows are, the higher the milk production. So it's not really like a exploitative relationship at all. It's actually more symbiotic than people think.
Exactly. Like that's the whole concept of one welfare.
Yeah.
That is, if you know the one health, that is health of humans, health of animals, and a healthy environment. Yeah. That's the same concept for welfare, and I strongly believe like if the cows and the farmers are both happy, this is going to help your production for sure.
For sure. Awesome. And we're already at 3:30. So is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience before we end the interview today?
No, thank you everyone for joining. And yeah, feel free to get in touch if you would like to give dairy cattle a try and come out at the dairy center to do some research with us.
Awesome. I know I'm convinced. I'm going to look into that research today.
Okay, send me another email.
Okay. Thanks so much for joining us today. And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to let us know, and then we'll direct it back to Emeline. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.